I'm Matt.
I'm Jesse.
I'm Julien.
We're going to be doing the effect of caffeine on sports-specific endurance performance. This study is done by the Journal of Strength Conditioning Research, and it was published January 2009.
So the purpose. So many studies have been done before on the ergogenic benefits of caffeine. However, they're not seen as practical or really can be related to sports, as most of them test an athlete to exhaustion in a certain amount of time. However, most sports, like the 400-meter dash, let's say, include an athlete doing the most amount of work at a set distance. So this article will use basically a systematic review, reviewing previous articles to give a better and sport-specific related approach to understand the ergogenic benefits of caffeine.
So these studies were done on men and women that include caffeine either in pills or in substances that you drink. And like Jesse said, it was a study over the amount of work a person does in a specific amount of time, not how long they go until they are tired. The exclusionary criteria is obviously the tests that were done while people push themselves to exhaustion. And then lastly, the scale that they used was called a Pedro scale. A Pedro scale, so the Physiotherapy Evidence Database scale. So this is a scale from 1 to 11, but it only had 10 points. The 11th was the credibility or being able to be added to the study. Any scores under 6 were not added.
So findings. So overall, it was not seen to vary based on the method of consumption of caffeine, meaning that if an athlete took a caffeine pill or a soft drink, let's say, there wasn't a big difference between the overall ergogenic effects of the caffeine in that athlete's performance. But it was seen that the benefits were most plentiful when an athlete would take it before or even before and during. It's generally recommended that if, let's say, the activity is longer, that an athlete takes it before and during the workout. But it was also seen that a percentage dosage of 3 to 6 milligrams times the body mass of the athlete would give the safest and best effects. Overall, if an athlete took it before, improvements were seen to be around a 2.3 to 3.2%. And if it was, let's say, a longer workout and the athlete took a caffeine before and during, benefits were seen to be a median around 4.3 to 5.3%.
So, how can we use caffeine in the fitness industry? How can it be applied? And an easy way to look at it is to look at the 5 W's and how, and as well as the methods. So what are we talking about here? We're obviously talking about caffeine. And who is it recommended for? It's really for anyone, but the article results recommend that it's specifically better for endurance and high intensity training athletes. So for anyone who wants to start using caffeine for their performance, it's recommended that they start with a small dose, right? Because everyone reacts different to caffeine because you have a different sensitivity to it. So you start with a small dose, and you want to make sure that you do it during training or practice and not an actual game or competition. So how? There's an equation for it, and it's basically the recommended dose for athletes is 6 milligrams times your body mass. It's pretty straightforward. Once you start getting used to it, that's what you want to follow. And then when do you want to take it? Well, you don't want to take it too early or too late. The maximized results is proven to be no longer than 60 minutes before your competition, and like Jesse mentioned, you can take it during the exercise as well. And also, the article stated that if you were training for a very specific important event or competition or game, to really maximize the effects of caffeine on your body, you want to avoid caffeine for an entire week, so 7 days before that competition. So why do we want to take caffeine in the industry? Well, it's proven to, improve physical performance, as Jesse stated. And then the other thing too is that it depends on a few variables that you want to look at. So why do we take caffeine? So you want to look at how much is consumed. So how much you're consuming, how often you're consuming it, right? Because the more you take it, the more regularly, then you start like developing a tolerance. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. So you start building a tolerance, and obviously you're looking at the timing and methods of ingestion. So finally, the methods. You have the classic methods. So coffee, tea, chocolate, energy drinks, cola, all that sort of thing. But if we look at the fitness industry, then you have the caffeine pills, the gel, the what's it called? The protein powder, the pre-workout, the creatine. There's even caffeinated water now. They even invented a bracelet, and they've also recently come out with caffeine e-cigarettes. So vaping caffeine, I guess, is the new thing. And then, so for the finally, questions that arise towards this caffeine being used in the fitness industry. So like Jesse said, we can use it during the activity, but we want to know how long does the activity have to be? Like, what's the minimum of time that you have to do in order to take caffeine during and for it to actually be effective and make a difference? The other is, if you're an athlete that trains regularly and you consume caffeine for your training, how easy is it for you to develop an addiction? And also regarding to that athlete who trains a lot, multiple times a week, and what if you're dependent on caffeine and then for a specific training or event you start skipping? Like, what happens if you skip? We want to know the negative effects that it would have on your body and performance. And we all know the effects towards physical performance, but we also want to know the untalked about side effects of caffeine, like if you're taking it regularly for performance. So would it affect your sleep? Would it affect your mood, your nutrition, your eating habits? All of those things that weren't talked about in the article. And finally, because ingesting caffeine is related to losing calcium, we want to know if you start using caffeine for performance, would you also have to start taking calcium supplements to prevent things like osteoporosis?
And just adding on to what Julien said, another question that I kind of arose while I was reading was caffeine is a diuretic, and it's often seen as like dehydrating. So if you're using it as an athlete, you don't want to be dehydrated, right? So how much caffeine would you need in order to like be safe and not dehydrate yourself, especially because we're talking about endurance aerobic sports? So that's another question that arose while I was reading the article. So now in terms of references, these are our references.
In the article?
Yeah. And as well as there's a link to the article. Once again, thank you very much for watching. This has been Jesse,
Matt,
Julien?